Remember last year's amazing trip? That cute first birthday party? All those photos, all those memories can be freed from your phone with a Shutterfly photo book. Rediscover and share your favorite moments with those you love. You'll be amazed how easy it is to make a photo book with Shutterfly and enjoy it for years to come. Get 40% off orders over $29 with code POD40 at Shutterfly.com and make something that means something.
The Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, the Cloak of Invisibility. Together they make the Deathly Hallows. Together they make one Master of Death. The last will and testament of Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore.
Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all those who live without love.
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We are covering Chapter 18, The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore. Now, we have another special episode today, because it's been a minute since we've had two guests on, but we have Julie.
Hey everybody.
And Mollie.
Hello.
This is also special because this is the first time you're actually on together.
Yep.
Nice. In unison. I like it. So this will be an interesting episode as we dive into Rita Skeeter's book. Obviously, this is about her novel on Albus Dumbledore, which I thought, hey, this is 13 pages. This is going to be super easy. This is going to be a quick episode. This is going to be quick prep. It's going to be great. Wow, there's a lot to dig into. So, before we get going on all of that, we do have some comments. We have a comment from DGMZ12 on our Instagram, who left the comment on Deathly Hallows Chapter 16, Godric's Hollow. And the comment is, "This is fun. Great show. Thank you for the reply. There are times I agree with you, Dan, but just couldn't wrap my head around this one. Have you all completed Hogwarts Legacy yet?" Obviously, that's regarding our back and forth that we've had with DG about the Ministry versus Harry thing, and that's fine. No one has to agree with me. It's all good. Still believe my take, but that's okay. As far as Hogwarts Legacy goes, I have completed it. Jen has completed it. Mollie is... How far are you in the game?
I'm a little more than I think halfway through. Mm-hmm. I got into that lower part of the map finally. Having a kid kind of pumps the brakes on my video game playing time.
That's fair. That's a fair point.
Feel that in my soul, which is why I have not played any of it.
Meanwhile, I stay up late at night playing video games, and it's totally fine.
What's that like, Dan?
I like the game a lot, personally. I think it's a really cool game. And yeah, that second part of the map is always fun when you're like, okay, I think I've done everything around Hogwarts. And then you realize there's a whole other second half to the map. And you're like, wow, this world expands. I think it's a really cool game to play. Maybe one of these days, if I could ever figure out Twitch, we will stream a playthrough. But I don't know. We'll see. Our second comment comes from Mabel, who left a comment on Deathly Hallows Chapter 15, The Goblin's Revenge. Mabel says, "I feel like Snape would make the password the antidote to a complicated potion, or just some obscure potion." That's from a discussion that we had about, obviously, if Snape's the headmaster now, what would his password be? This is actually a pretty good suggestion, actually. I think it's probably pretty accurate.
Yeah, I can see that, but I also feel like Snape is very cunning, and I think something like an antidote to a potion or a potion ingredient or an obscure potion would almost feel too easy for him. I think he would find something from his childhood or some super obscure thing that no one else would know about him, so that it is purely a password that is only for him.
What if you had to show the gargoyle one of the Potter Stinks badges from the Goblet of Fire, like the Triwizard Tournament? You just show them that, you just show the gargoyle that, and you're like, okay, you're allowed.
You're in.
Yeah. Maybe
you had to go up and say 10 points from Gryffindor.
And then we have a comment from Isla? I will never be able to pronounce this name correctly. Let us know what the pronunciation is. who left a comment on Prisoner of Azkaban, Chapter 7, The Boggart in the Wardrobe. Now, her last comment was from Sorcerer's Stone, so she is clipping through our podcast.
Yes!
So thank you for binging the podcast, it seems like. But she says, I just found your YouTube channel. New sub. Love your guys' stuff. Thank you very much. Thank you for subscribing on the YouTube channel. We just started the YouTube channel a couple of months ago, and we literally just started Blue Sky. We're on Blue Sky now, which is a great transition. We've just got our first couple of posts in, so you could
Look
also
at us.
find
We're
us.
so trendy.
We're trying. We're trying. Yeah, so you can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Blue Sky now. You can find us still on Twitter and on Instagram, all at HogwartsAPod if you search for us. We'll be posting stuff there. You could leave comments, participate in our polls. You could leave a comment or participate in the poll that's left on Spotify, which is where a lot of our stuff comes through. So all of that lets us interact with you, and we love having the comments. We love getting the back and forth. It's great, and we appreciate all of it. So thank you so much. Now, we have what I thought was going to be a small little 13-page chapter, and instead it's a deep dive analysis into one Albus Dumbledore. Obviously, this chapter takes place the morning after getting back from Godric's Hollow, so Hermione and Harry are still reeling from the events of that night, and Harry ends up sitting outside, and Hermione brings the book over, and they kind of pour through the book, including an interesting letter that is found. So, really, it just starts out with Harry kind of reminiscing about all of the injuries and ailments that he's had throughout the years, which is numerous. But he does say that he's never felt so vulnerable, naked, and fatally weakened as he does now that his wand is broken.
That makes so much sense, though, because think about it. In the magical world, like, you're nothing without your wand. Like, you still have the ability, like, you still have the magic within you, but without having a wand, especially a wand that chose you, plus add in the Phoenix Core and that, you know, Harry's wand just decides to do things for him. But, like, it makes total sense to me that of all that he's been through, this is when he feels the most vulnerable, because now, even if he gets a new wand, like, it's not one that's going to necessarily, I don't want to say listen to him, but, like, it's not going to work as efficiently as his actual wand.
The events of this book really kick off with the Seven Potters scene, and then his, I don't want to call it an obsession with the wand, but a little bit of an obsession with the wand after it, you know, spins in his hand and then deflects such a powerful entity as Voldy. I can imagine he's like, oh no, my most powerful weapon is now not a thing anymore.
Weapon and protection.
Yeah. He ends up tucking the broken wand into his pouch with other, what he calls, broken and useless objects. I think of the mirror, specifically, the shard that Sirius gave him, and the snitch that won't open. So he's like, this is stupid. Like, I don't know why Dumbledore gave me this. It can't even open. He actually contemplates chucking the snitch into the wilderness, but thinks twice about it. But he does call it impenetrable, unhelpful, useless. Like everything else Albus left behind.
I love me a sassy Harry.
Sassy, not emo, though.
Yes, sassy, not emo.
Okay, just a clarification.
We should clarify that. Sassy, not emo.
I'm just thinking in my head, where are you?
I'm sure somewhere there's a Harry Potter cover of some, like, My Chemical Romance song. Just switch the lyrics around. That'd be great, though. He also thinks back to, you know, since Albus left him almost nothing, like virtually no info to go on going forward, Voldy, however, seems to have all of the info he now needs to obtain his, I guess, goals that Harry has assumed. Because obviously he's seen Voldy trying to chase down this individual, and now he has a lead. He's actually seen this photograph, and something has clearly clicked in Voldy, like, oh, I found him now. I have him. So he's a little disconcerted by that. And I guess the question I'm going to pose to you both is, early in this book, we find out that Hermione discovers that basilisk venom is a possible way to destroy a Horcrux. Do you think Dumbledore was like, in a perfect world, let's say, in a perfect world where the Astronomy Tower doesn't happen, do you think he was planning a field trip, like one last lesson of the year, and he goes down to the Chamber of Secrets and he's like, here's a fang, like, here you go.
I don't
Here's
think
your
so.
answer.
I think that Dumbledore went, well, Harry took the fang and put it through the diary. We know the diary's a Horcrux, so put 2 and 2 together, bro.
That's fair,
like,
too.
Dumbledore's
That's
whole
fair,
thing
too.
is, like, he just continuously leaves breadcrumbs for the trio instead of actually helping. There are so many things that he could have done along the way to help make this whole thing involve less camping. But I feel like there's so much information that Dumbledore could have left them without it being, I don't know, like a threat to the mission, because I'm sure someone will disagree with me and say that Dumbledore had to like keep it to himself so that the Death Eaters wouldn't get an upper hand or the information wouldn't fall into the wrong hands. But I feel like there's so many ways that it could have been coded that, like, even if you wrote them like a secret message and had them go find a cipher, like, come on, there's something that you could have done to help them.
I think you bring up a good point about the whole diary scenario, because Harry should have all of that information because he was there and he did it. He never does actually bring up the whole idea, like, all throughout Book 6 and early Book 7 when they're trying to figure out, like, ooh, Horcruxes and how might we get rid of them? And he's never like, oh, I did that already. I've been there and done that. Here's what I used. Couldn't he then return himself at some point to the Chamber of Secrets before Book 6 ends and was like, I'm going to stock up on these real quick? This is a good point that I never thought of before. I'm like, you should have that answer already.
Yeah.
But anyway, Hermione tentatively approaches Harry, and she's obviously still a little cautious around him because she's still feeling a lot of the responsibility for his wand breaking. And she knows Harry has a tendency to be a little aggressive sometimes when he gets a little moody. But I think the difference here is I think she's more tentative because I think she feels that some of the fault is hers.
Yeah.
So she's like, no, this is kind of my bad. So it's a little bit more like, oh, Harry's got like a valid reason to be like angry with me.
Well, just
Whether that's true or not.
losing your wand. I mean,
Yeah.
how she's empathetic, obviously, so I'm sure, and a part of her is like, I would be distraught if I lost my wand too. So.
Yeah.
And it's not like they can just walk into like a wand shop and casually get another one.
Yeah, they have to at least leave the country for that, minimally. So, not easy to do. But she gives Harry a copy of The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore. I feel like this is a rare moment when we actually get the chapter title, like, right off the top of a chapter. Usually we have to wait till, like, the last page of the chapter, but here we go.
Yeah.
She ended up snatching it from Bathilda's home, and Rita apparently gave her a copy with a note that essentially said, quote, "You said everything, even if you don't remember it." Great. That's super encouraging.
It's giving Lockhart.
The book and the chapters involving Dumbledore that we're going to get into is a lot, but I just wanted to throw out a potential Rita tinfoil hat theory that I have, okay?
Can't wait.
Let's go.
I cannot wait.
So, look, this is probably not actually what happened. I grant you that. It's probably a ridiculous, maybe some might say even outlandish possibility.
Or very believable.
Or very believable. Whichever way you want to take. Whichever way you want to go with it. So, here's the facts. We know that Rita sat down with Bathilda and had this interview. Clearly. And we know she's thanking Bathilda for her evidence, whether she gave it
Willingly or not.
willingly or not, or whatever the circumstances might be. And then, now we know she's dead. And the snake, Nagini, has been put inside Bathilda's body and is puppeted around, right?
Not super creepy.
I'm not creepy at all. And I'm saying, based on Voldy's reactions of being in Godric's Hollow again, it seems like that was the first time he's been there since that Halloween night, is the vibe I got. Mm-hmm. Based on those facts, Rita's a Death Eater who killed Bathilda Bagshot and put the snake inside her body.
Possible.
Possible. I'm taking a plausible answer.
I'm down for any tinfoil hat theory. I will say yes to it no matter what.
Thank you.
I was going to say, usually I'm here for a good tinfoil hat theory, but I think the caveat there is a good tinfoil hat theory.
I think the book she leaves her with a note is a cover. Mm-hmm. I think it's a cover. I think she's like, oh, thank you so much, Bathilda. Oh, thank you for your help. Here's a copy of the book.
Okay, so here's why I give that reaction. Mm-hmm. Rita being a Death Eater, I don't think is a big stretch. Her being close enough to Voldy to be able to put Nagini in Bathilda, no.
Maybe she wooed Voldy with such an eloquent, poetic, maybe, even poetic description of his power and his might.
The pen.
The power of the pen. See, Molly, we're on the same page.
I mean, she is an animagus, so she may be able to speak to Nagini somehow.
Oh, that's true, too.
No.
There you go. I like it.
I'm on board, Dan.
There you go. No, it's probably absolutely ridiculous. It's probably absolutely ridiculous and very much not true, but I like the idea.
Spin-off of Voldy's secret admirer, who's actually Rita Skeeter via pen pal.
I like it. I like it.
Go. No, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, that took a turn.
Yeah, a real turn. I hope I'm entertaining at the very least with my tinfoil hat theories. So, Hermione asks Harry if he's still angry with her. Valid question. But Harry quietly responds, no, I know it was an accident.
I mean, what else is he gonna say? Like, you can't, like, be like, well, yeah, my wand is snapped in half. Like, she's all you got. And let's be real, I talk about this all the time. Harry would not be here in book 7 without Hermione. I mean, and I guess round 2. But, like...
Wow, that was such a flippant... He would not be here without Hermione. I guess round 2.
I mean, listen, Ron played chess once.
Oh, man.
Oh, wow. Shots taken at Ron. No, I mean, I get it. I think it's a more mature stance from Harry in that he is angry, he is emotional at the time. And, you know, sometimes, especially when you're still a teen and he's still a teenager, when you're emotional, you might let something slip that you don't even mean, but you're going to let it slip anyway. And he's able to self-check here and be like, she's not the one I'm mad at. Like, I'm mad at the situation, but, like, what he basically goes on to say is, like, look, you did the best you could. You helped get me out of there ultimately safely. I'm here, and that's partly, mostly due to what you did. So, no, I'm not mad at you. And the tone with which he takes, I think, is also important. He just doesn't, like, say it. He says it quietly, more reserved, more deferential. I view it as, which all matters. And something he might not have done, like, 2 years ago. So, growth, I think. But Harry sees the book, rifles through the book, and eventually spots the picture in the book he was looking for. And it's the same picture he saw in Umbridge's office at the Ministry of Magic with Dumbledore. And what we now know is Grindelwald, shortly after Albus's mother's passing. Julie, you had a great note.
Yes, I have a petition for Grindelwald to now be called Grindy. So now all dark wizards will be referred to as Voldy or Grindy.
Sorry. First of all, totally on board with that.
Yes.
Second of all, I swear. So we had this talk during prep as I saw everybody's notes and we're going over what we wanted to talk about. And I'm like, yeah, that's totally fine. I totally get it. And then as you just mentioned that now, because I apparently just really thought about it for the first time, the first one goes to Bellatrix, and I'm like, so are we calling her Belly? Ooh. And that's like my first thought. And I'm like, oh, that's really weird.
I like it, though.
Yeah, right?
Here for it.
Okay, all right.
We will update everyone on all Death Eater's new names.
We should post like a whole list of updated Dark Wizards names. Oh, man.
Yep.
So what do we think initially of Harry spotting the picture in the book, and it's Albus and Grindelwald together sharing a laugh?
Surprising.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would just further fuel Harry's anger. I mean, you now all of a sudden see a picture with the second most powerful dark wizard, and they're just all chummy, when so much information has already been hidden from you. Like, this just makes it worse.
I think it's one of those, and we'll get to a lot of Rita's actual writing on the topic here in a minute or so. But I think what the picture does is it starts you off with a sense of validity to it. Like, oh, that's a picture, and it's them together. Yeah. It's very clearly Albus. Like, and obviously everybody knows the history between those two. So the picture she's about to paint now gets some base level of credibility because it's plausible now.
Yeah, and you figure back then it's not like they had AI or Photoshop. I mean, I don't know how easy it is to alter a magical portrait, but
yeah,
I wouldn't put it past Rita to put like a fake picture in her book, but like that seems like something that's difficult to do in the magical world.
You just find somehow a picture of Grindy like laughing, and then you just crop it. Yep. Like just like cut it down the middle, and you cut the picture of Albus down the middle, and then you just like paste them and like mend them together somehow. So we will take a break actually before we get to the greater good, as this whole chapter is actually called in Rita's book. We'll take a short break, get to the break sound, and we'll be right back. Before we get to our break sound, I'd like to acknowledge our friend Andy, who helps us produce our intros and our break sounds. If you want to hear more of Andy's work and like Formula One racing, check out the Outlap F1 podcast. It's your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. You can find them wherever you listen to podcasts, and they even have a YouTube page. So check out Andy, Cody, John, James, and Deanna, and join them on the Outlap.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger for thousands of appetizing ingredients that inspire countless mouth-watering meals. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices. Plus, extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week and up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with points. So you can get big flavors and big savings. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Dobby has no master. Dobby is a free elf.
All right, so we are back with the second part of this chapter, and it gets into a specific chapter of the life and lives of Albus Dumbledore. The chapter is entitled The Greater Good. And the chapter starts off with Albus's resume, I guess? 18-year-old Albus had already achieved head boy, prefect, the Barnabas Finkley Prize for Exceptional Spell Casting, and he was a youth rep for the Wizengamot from Britain. He was a gold medalist for groundbreaking contribution to the International Alchemical Conference, which was held in Cairo. That's a hefty resume for an 18-year-old student, graduate of Hogwarts.
Yeah.
You know, Molly, you know what this reminds me of, actually? Have you ever been to a conference?
Yes.
Like a professional conference? And you go up, and you sit in your chair, and you wait for them to introduce the speaker, and you have to wait like a good 20 minutes for the speech to actually start, or the lecture to start, because they're just rattling off this person's accomplishments for literally like 20 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
This is what this reads as. Of like, before we
Except he's 18.
Yeah, which is nuts.
Right.
So, I guess kudos to Albus for just wrecking everything. And I guess it also puts it on perspective, like, we've at least heard of talented students before come through Hogwarts. You know, we've heard of the Barty Crouches. We've heard of Bill and Percy and all these people that rack up great academic achievements. Hermione. But That is a lot.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
this
and
is a
most of
lot.
them are also, they rack up all these achievements after Hogwarts, not...
Yeah, I mean, this is right. I mean, and this is some international stuff, too,
Yeah.
which is even crazier. It's not just Britain. He's the Britain youth rep to the Wizengamot, which I guess means I always envisioned the Wizengamot as a Britain-specific thing, but the impression I'm getting here is it's an international thing. Because he's the British rep. He's the
Yeah, I don't know.
Britain youth rep. Mm-hmm. And then, obviously, the International Alchemical Conference, which, I mean, that's nuts.
I want to know who Barnabas Finkley is. I mean, he has a cool name.
Apparently an exceptional spellcaster.
I like that your interest is based on his name, not that he has, like, a
100%.
award based.
So, Rita, as we get into the actual chapter, the actual writing that takes place, right out the bat, discredits Alpheus and calls him some interesting names. Dog breath is what she refers to him as right out the gate. And then follows that up with dim-witted but devoted. And, I mean, just a sense there. We'll get into the whole Rita Skeeter part of this book towards the end, but clearly the writing is a little...
Biased,
bombastic, hyperbolic. It's interesting. Not what you'd normally find in a normal biography. Let's just say that. She also quotes Enid Smeek about Aberforth. Enid notes, threw goat dung at her head, trying to paint Aberforth as a more wild young man, I suppose. Less refined than Albus. Bathilda admired Albus and his achievements at school, thus writing him a letter and kind of ingratiating herself into the Dumbledore family via Albus. There are some quotes about Bathilda that Rita includes in this. One is from Ivor Dillinsby, who said about Bathilda, "You know, the fire's lit, but the cauldron's empty." Okay. And Enid Smeek, again, pops up with, "She's nutty as squirrel poo."
Solid.
You know what I'm learning about Enid Smeek? She's 2 quotes in, and she's mentioned poo twice. Did anybody else catch that?
Yep.
Her 2 quotes in this thing have both been dung-related.
She's hyperfixated.
Apparently.
I'm concerned.
I, as well, am a little concerned.
I mean, that's a solid insult, though.
I'm just reading this. I'm like, really? We're going here.
Yep.
Okay. All right. This tracks. So obviously Rita is acknowledging that her primary, like, big time source is a little suspect at this point in her life. Like, she's acknowledging that. But yeah, so Rita acknowledges, like, hey, Bathilda is struggling, but she notes that Rita, as a veteran reporter, knows how to get the facts out of a difficult source. Which I feel like this is just an interesting angle. Also, this is not at the beginning of the book. This is like somewhere in the middle of the book. Mm-hmm. This is odd to have. You're like, here's my source. Here, yes, it's a little iffy, but I'm good at this, so we're good. Like halfway into the book. Like not like right out the gate being like a little disclaimer of like, hey, Bathilda Bagshot's featured in this book. Yes, she's maybe not at her best, but trust that good reporting was done and facts were checked and we have the truth.
Facts were checked by Rita Skeeter.
It's like she's trying to convince herself and everyone.
Yes. It does have that vibe of a little bit of like convincing herself like, no, this is good. This is solid.
I don't know that Rita Skeeter is necessarily convincing herself. I think she's just like throwing a bunch of like almost like facts at people to be like, guys, look, I gave you 37 facts. How could I be wrong?
Yeah, that's true.
Yep.
Yeah.
She also admits to using Veritas serum on Bathilda. Like,
How are there no repercussions from that? Like, it's
I
written
agree.
in the book. How did no one read? I mean, the Ministry has more important things to work on right now. But
yes, but the ministry,
know,
the
Dan?
ministry is a whole thing right now.
maybe she is a Death Eater. Maybe.
Ah! It's taken me a little bit into part 2. I'm somewhat convinced. 2 people on my tinfoil hat theory.
Somewhat is the key word there, Dan. Somewhat.
I'll take whatever I can get. No, I agree with you. I don't know how that's okay. Like, how can you use a potion, which is essentially like a drug, to coerce information out of somebody? Like, I don't understand how that's
also,
illegal.
Isn't it regulated?
Veritaserum, yes, Veritaserum in the Harry Potter universe is a highly regulated potion, strictly controlled by the Ministry of Magic due to its powerful truth-telling effects, meaning its use is heavily monitored and not readily available to just anyone.
Yeah.
Per the Harry Potter wiki.
Also, how did Rita Skeeter get it? Like, is she actually, like, really skilled at potions?
Death Eater.
The evidence is mounting in a certain direction. I'm just saying. Okay, all right. I'm gonna reel this in just a bit. I'm gonna reel it in just a bit because I'm sure people are going nuts. No, I don't think Rita Skeeter is a Death Eater.
Lies, Dan. You do.
That being said, is there some questionable stuff going on with Rita? Oh yeah, there's some really questionable things going on with Rita here that I think do deserve a little more of a look into. Like you said, how is she getting and like procuring and using this Veritaserum without any source of like penalty or repercussion? Problem. How did she get the Bathilda Big Shot, interview? How did she score that without, again, anybody being like, hey, this lady's taking advantage of a woman who's quite elderly and a little like, I brought up the question during the Bathilda's Secret chapter of, no one's checking in on her? Like, she's a famous person in town. No one's, like, checking in to see how she's doing? Like, is she okay?
I think right now at this point, everyone's kind of each man for themselves. Like, that Voldemort's back, that the Death Eaters are out, and, I mean, why would you want to associate yourself with someone close to Dumbledore?
Yeah, it just seems odd that a famous elderly person is just left in their house alone to whatever circumstances.
Nope, doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, that stuff happens all the time.
Yeah.
In the real world.
Yeah.
Not to be dark.
No, I mean, I get it. It's just Rita's able to take advantage. So,
yeah.
Anyway, we do learn a little bit more about Bathilda. Bathilda ended up welcoming her great-nephew during one summer. And this is actually a detail that I had actually forgotten about. I had forgotten that she was actually related to Grindy. I
Same.
Totally forgot that they were actually connected. Grindy is second to Voldy in Dark Wizard lore, I guess. The issue, though, is he never really extended his reach to Britain. It had always been an international push to power. And we had talked about, in one of the earlier chapters, Hermione notices a mark above one of the stories in Beetle the Bard. And Harry's like, oh yeah, Crumb was mentioning something about it being like the mark of Grindelwald. And Hermione's like, what? I've read everything there is to read on Grindelwald, and I have never read him having a specific mark. And obviously the Ministry of Magic looked over the Tales of the Beetle the Bard, the specific issue. They must have seen the mark, but they must not have really considered it either a threat or anything even notable to really like check on. So the idea that his reach never extending into Britain, did Britain just be like, not our problem, deal with it?
Yeah, I kind of always forget this part, that like he never really extended his reach to Britain, especially since like he's talked about, not super frequently in the books, but like everyone knows who he is. Mm-hmm. So like in my mind, like reading the books, I never really associated it with like, oh, he was just elsewhere. I always assumed that it was essentially like Britain just keeps getting targeted here. What a nice little island. Let's take it over. I kind of always forget that he never really like was actually, I think it's because since Dumbledore was like his ultimate like demise, you just kind of assume.
Yeah, I think the assumption, at least Wizarding world historically, is that Albus provided like this bubble of protection over like Britain, where Grindelwald's like, okay, I have all of this freedom to do whatever I want, I just can't do it there. Molly, you've seen the Fantastic Beasts movies, yeah. So small comment. I hope everybody was able to pick up The tone of disappointment.
The amount of regret in Molly's voice.
Molly, you've watched the Fantastic movies? Yeah. They are not the greatest movies. I will grant you that.
The first one was good.
Yes.
There was a lot of potential. And
then they just went a different direction, tried to combine a whole lot of different storylines. But one of those storylines is Grindelwald and Albus's connection. Specifically in the last movie, they try to tie that all together. But they also include Grindy's rise to power through using, like, political means. So, like, him and Voldy had two very different ways of going about taking power. Grindy wanted to be generally front and center and be like, I'm the politician, like, vote for me to be your ruling entity or whatever. And Voldy's all shadow-based, like, completely. Interesting kind of dynamic between the two. However, that doesn't mean Grindy was not doing stuff in the shadows, because we go on to learn that he was educated at Durmstrang, which is like what Crumb said at the wedding. But he was expelled at 16. And that's noteworthy because Durmstrang has a history of being a little bit more into the dark arts and a little bit more pushing the boundaries of some darker magic. So the idea that he was expelled at 16, and even Durmstrang was like, hey, you need to slow it down.
you guy.
Yeah. Don't know about you. Concerning is what that is. At least Tom Riddle finished Hogwarts. Which you could also argue whether he should have even been there in the first place after what Albus had seen or heard during his previous interview.
Voldy's just seems very manipulative when you look back at his time spent at Hogwarts, where probably maybe Grindy was a little bit more up in your face about it at Durmstrang.
Yeah.
Well, I think Grindy was allowed a little bit more freedom at Durmstrang to maybe experiment.
Yeah.
Voldy, he had Dumbledore watching his, like, every move.
Yeah.
So Grindy just clearly went a little too far one time and was like, no. So we get to a letter, essentially. That's really the hallmark of this chapter of her book. And it's a letter from Albus to Grindy. We're not going to read the whole letter, but the point of it is essentially Dumbledore's writing to Grindy to give him advice on how to proceed with plans they've clearly talked about. And Grindelwald has a point about wizard dominance being for the Muggles' own good, which Albus notes is a crucial point to the whole argument. And Albus goes on to say they must use power responsibly, and if they are to rule over the Muggles, they have a responsibility over the ruled. And he continues with only force when necessary, nothing more. And notes that's where he went wrong at Durmstrang. He used too much force, maybe too openly, too quickly, whatever. That was your mistake. Can't do that again. That's essentially the note, or the letter. Obviously, we'll break down the letter, because there's a lot to break down. It's an alarming letter for Harry to read, I think, to say the least. And I think us reading it for the first time, I think it's a little shocking, because you just read the words through the letter and you're like, this is a little questionable. This is a little iffy. You're talking about openly ruling over a people. Little hints of dictatorship, authoritarianism, a little bit. He's not saying don't do it. He's not saying, hey, this is a bad idea. He's not saying, whoa, we need to stop this. What are you talking about? He's giving him advice on how to do it better.
Well, so I have lots of thoughts on this letter. I have a chart, Dan.
I can confirm Julie has indeed charted out a whole process on this letter. It might show up on Instagram later.
So we're talking about how Harry sees this letter as alarming. Obviously, Rita Skeeter sees it as her way to, like, make it Dumbledore's downfall, so
like a smoking gun.
Yeah. But personally, I don't even see it that way, because the way that it's written is very much Dumbledore is responding to Grindy. And so he's clearly responding to specific points. And yes, I think that they are aligned in the overall idea, but I think their intent and execution is completely separate. When you look at it, Dumbledore is saying, like, yes, I agree, we should rule, but Dumbledore views it as we have this power, we have this magical ability to make things better. It makes sense that we're in charge so that we can help people. Whereas Grindy sees it as we have this power, we should use it to suppress people because we're more powerful. For the greater good, Dumbledore is quite literally saying we are doing this for the greater good of everyone. We have this ability, we shouldn't be in secret, we should be sharing it to help people. Whereas Grindelwald is going, for the greater good, yes, for my greater good, because I'm clearly magically talented. I have a friend who's like extremely magically talented, and for the greater good, we will do this and make it better while I happen to get all of the power. When you're talking about resistance, Dumbledore is saying, like, people are going to resist this because they want to stay hidden. They don't want to be taken advantage of. Like, they fear being in the open, or people just don't like change. I mean, think about even non-magical worlds. Like, we don't like any major shift in the power structure. Whereas Grindelwald wants, like, he knows there's going to be resistance because he's trying to oppress people. He's not coming out in the open to help people. He's coming out in the open to become more powerful. When you're saying that don't use more force that's necessary, like, only use the force that's necessary and no more, Dumbledore is saying, like, listen, there's people who aren't going to get it, so you're gonna kind of have to give them a little shove to get in line. Whereas when Grindy knows that he is talking specifically to oppress Muggleborns and put wizards in higher power, like, there's going to be a resistance movement. He's going to need to use force to get to that point, the same way Voldemort does. And I think looking at it overall, it's like, it's two sides of the same coin. Like, yes, they're talking about the same thing. One is essentially, it's literally good versus evil. Like, Dumbledore has a more wholehearted intent. Grindy is more focused on the him. And I think Rita's using it because it does seem like a smoking gun. And when you're reading all of Rita Skeeter's writings, like, you're looking for that smoking gun. You're looking for the, like, the drama, like, what salacious content is in there that's going to, like, pivot my thoughts. Rita Skeeter's not writing this biography of Albus Dumbledore for people to be like, oh, Albus, he was such a great guy. Like, she's writing it so that she can be the one that broke the story. She's the one that made everyone realize that Dumbledore wasn't amazing. And I don't know, I don't buy that immediately reading this letter, you assume malicious intent.
Molly? I don't expect you to have, like, a pie chart or maybe an Excel sheet.
I'd like a PowerPoint presentation.
A vision board.
A vision board would be...
Knitted response.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I also have to just out myself in terms of how I approach podcasts here. I'm very much I don't take notes and I roll with it. I'm sure everybody has figured that out by now.
I'm an aggressive note taker.
I'm more of the Hufflepuff laid back, like, let's see how this goes.
I love it. I love it both. I love both sides.
Which I admire very much. I wish I could do that. I've tried it in the past, but no. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think that Rita Skeeter took this letter out of context and put a lot of, like, of her clickbaity type approach to it. You know, it's like when you think back to the Goblet of Fire and her articles there where Harry was on the other side of that. You know, I think he's forgetting that right now because he's so fueled by his frustration with Dumbledore at this point. You just have to take a step back and reread it a few times and be like, okay, you know, this isn't maybe as malicious as it sounds, with ill intent. I think that at this point, maybe Dumbledore and Grindy's relationship was more of like an academic one, right? Where they're just two minds coming together discussing things.
Yeah.
Also, two young minds.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
they're teenagers still.
Right.
Who have recognized an equal that maybe they haven't ever witnessed before.
And they're dreamers, and they're, just two different sides of the spectrum. It's that saying, like, you don't learn anything from somebody who agrees with you. Mm-hmm. And I think that they're both highly intelligent, so that's maybe some of what their friendship was about. That they could have these educational conversations and go back and forth on things. That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah. So I agree completely with both of you, and I don't really have much to add to what you both said. Like I said, I agree. So instead, I'll spin it like Rita's spinning this from her point of view and from just the general person in the wizarding world's point of view. What she's trying to do is paint Albus in a negative light and connect him to one of the most infamous dark wizards that's ever lived. And if I'm being honest, while our interpretations might not be... Like, we've dived into this letter.
Yeah.
Like, like Julie, you keep saying, like, we're an AP English class on this podcast, where we dive far too deeply into things. And that's what we're doing with this letter. Yeah. The average person in the wizarding world is not going to do that.
Yeah, well, and the average person, I think, wants to find something wrong with Dumbledore.
Possibly.
I mean, like, think about it. Like, you guys cannot tell me that if there's someone that you view as, like, perfect, sunshine is glowing around them all the time, that, like, if you find out something bad about them, that you're not like, yes.
Right.
Well, I think Mollie
they're
and I
not perfect. They're not amazing. They're not all... Oh, he's dark, too? Mm-hmm. Yep, I knew something was off about him.
I think Mollie and I had a conversation on one of the earlier chapters about, like, if you see... Like, you have a favorite celebrity.
Yeah.
And you see an article that's something positive about that celebrity, or you have an article that says something negative about that celebrity, which are you more likely to click on? Probably the negative one, because that's just human nature. And she's playing to that. So she's building this picture. I mean, literally, she has a picture of the two of them sharing a laugh. And now you have a letter where, let's be real, Albus does fondly refer to Grindy here. He's not really confrontational. He's not really antagonistic. He's like, you could read between the lines of, I like where you're going, but let's do it this way instead.
Right.
Like, it's not contradictory enough for, I think, what the general public would feel like, oh, he's clearly with him on his thoughts, on his line of thinking. And I think just a general scan of the letter, yeah, I could definitely buy that.
Yeah, well,
like, if that's what you're selling, I could buy that.
That's the thing, is he is essentially in line with Grindy on his overall thoughts, but again, it's the intent. And I think we're breaking it down that way because, I mean, that's literally our point.
Right.
And that's what people should do.
Yeah. But, like, I think the average person isn't going to sit there and go, okay, well, this is how he really meant it. They're going to go, oh, so he felt that way.
They're going to think twice about it. And be like, hey, wait a second. That's suspicious. Mm-hmm. And then, again, you look at the picture and you're like, hey, wait a second. This seems really off. And it seems like really good evidence. I mean, you have it in Albus's handwriting, which is commonplace. Everybody knows Albus's handwriting because his handwriting is on so many important documents and all that kind of stuff. So you know his handwriting. And now you have a picture and it's like, oh, man, this is incriminating. This looks bad. She finishes the chapter by kind of framing this all in... It was 2 months of friendship between the two of them over that summer before they departed. And they wouldn't meet again, at least anyone knows. They didn't meet again until their famous duel that everybody knows about. That's part of wizarding history. And then she finishes with the funeral for Ariana and Aberforth breaking Albus's nose. And the implication is that Grindy and Albus and Aberforth had some sort of disagreement. Grindy said, I'm out. And then this fight happened at the funeral. So that's how the chapter ends.
Sorry, going back one more time to the letter. It
Yeah.
just kind of reminds me in a way, too, it popped up in my head of, like, Voldy and Slughorn when they were talking originally about the Horcrux. Like, this is all hypothetical, right? Like, I gotta wonder if there's some kind of...
Like, we're just sharing theoretical
Right,
thought.
Yeah.
exactly.
In theory, right? Not
Yeah.
actually, like, practically rolling this out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Good thought. So we do have the aftermath of them reading this chapter and this letter, and it starts out with basically what Molly was talking about, Hermione being like, hey, Harry, you know Rita. You know how she writes. You know she skirts the truth sometimes, or purposefully misleads you, or all of this, trickery that she includes in her writing. You know that, right? You remember that. She did it to you. And Harry's like, yes, but this is, again, pretty incriminating. Like, they knew each other. Like, this is his writing. This is a picture. Like, everything I just said. Like, hey, wait a second. This is more than that. Even Hermione acknowledges, like, well, Albus does seem to have given Grindelwald his whole motto. Like, his whole thing that he lived for, that for the greater good, was, like, his thing. Mm-hmm. Like, I might not have recognized the symbol, but this motto is everywhere.
Yeah.
And it is tied to Grindy, and it seems like Albus gave it to him. So much so that it's even above the prison that... this is another detail that I completely forgot about. Mm-hmm. I forgot that Grindy built this prison to hold his own enemies.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a crazy detail.
Yeah.
That I had forgotten about. It ended up, obviously, housing him. Mm-hmm. And that prison is called Nurmengard, which sounds like it's from The Lord of the Rings, but it's Nurmengard. Hermione tries to build that excuse for Albus of like, well, Albus was young, he wasn't really like, into the wizarding world just yet. And Harry's like, I'm sorry, he's 18. We're here trying to save the wizarding world at 17. So how different is it really? Like, if we shouldn't take him seriously, should you take us seriously? Like, how does that work? It's actually a great piece of logic that Harry spins on Hermione, and Hermione doesn't really have a good answer for that because there isn't one. But yeah, I like the kind of symmetry of Albus and Grindy trying to take over and Harry and Hermione trying to fight a takeover. That's a really good kind of imagery. And then Hermione and Harry end up going over this long debate over Albus's life and intentions and his accomplishments. And they go back and forth with, all of it. And I have to ask you both, who do you have in this debate? Hermione, who is pro-Albus, and Harry, who is against Albus. Who are you taking?
Team Hermione.
You're Team Hermione. You're pro-Albus.
I am.
Okay, Molly?
I'm Team Hermione.
Team Hermione.
Yeah.
I must admit, as much as I would like to take Team Harry here just to be the devil's advocate, I actually am also pro-Hermione.
Yeah, I think it's like Harry is very much acting out based on his current situation, and like he's mad that he's again finding more things that Dumbledore never told him about, but I would also argue that a lot of what's going on here isn't necessarily relevant to find the Horcruxes and get rid of them. And I think Harry just keeps feeling betrayed. And I mean, we see it time and time again in the books that once Harry feels betrayed by someone that's close to him, like, he spirals. He spirals, he lashes out, he doesn't think rationally anymore. And Hermione is trying to remind him, like, listen, it's one thing. It doesn't necessarily change the good that he's done. And similar to how we talk a lot of times of, like, remembering the age of the trio, like, at this time, like, they were two 18-year-olds. Like, think about all the stupid stuff you say when you're 18.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of similar to that. Like, Dumbledore was how old when he died? And, like, you're concerned about this thing that happened when he was 18, when he eventually, like, quite literally, like, stamped it out.
Yeah. I agree with a lot of that as well. are you taking a 2-month sample of his life and discounting the decades after? Yeah.
Right. People are allowed to make mistakes and grow and learn and change. And
It would be a little different if Albus had actually followed through on any of the stuff he put in the letter and actually enacted some of that stuff. That would be a little different. That would be a different conversation that we're having. However, he didn't. It was just a conversation between two people that honestly was meant to probably stay private, be private and stay private between them.
Right.
I think Harry's being a touch over aggressive here in his just slander of Albus. But again, he's in a mood, and he's already prior to this reading this chapter had very negative thoughts about Albus.
Right.
While wearing the locket and not wearing the locket. Mm-hmm. And also he's had some negative thoughts about Albus based on even Ron and Hermione, who have influenced a lot of Harry's thoughts because he feels like he's not leading well because he felt like he was not led well. So it's the blind leading the blind a little bit, maybe.
Yeah.
So that's what a lot of Harry's feeling. And Hermione calls Harry out for this, being like, you're only angry about all of this because Dumbledore didn't tell you any of it himself.
Yep.
Yeah.
About the Godric's Hollow connection, about the Horcruxes, about ways to destroy the Horcruxes, about his own family history in Godric's Hollow. And to Harry's credit, I will say this, he acknowledges it. Maybe not like the best, because he's not mad at Hermione here. It's important to be like, they're having a debate, and maybe their voices are being raised. He's not mad at her. He's still mad at Albus. He's just kind of venting at this point. Mm-hmm. And so when Hermione brings that up, he's like, yeah, but like I still want to be mad. Mm-hmm. He also acknowledges it's hard to be thrust into everything, but given so little to go on other than, well, just trust me. I'm right, just trust me. Mm-hmm. Which I think a lot of people can empathize with. Whether it's something benign as like just your boss at work being like, do this. Mm-hmm. And you're just like, oh, is that the right thing to do? Should I be doing that? I don't know. Like, I know I'm in a profession where people tell me to do a lot of things all the time. Whether it's a parent or a coach or an administrator. And I'm just like, yeah, but you know what? Is that in the best interest of this situation?
Right.
Or is that in your best interest at this particular time? Mm-hmm. I'm not sure you're being 100% honest with yourself here. And it's hard for Harry to come to that realization of just like, he just put me out front in a war that I don't even know fully what my role is here. I'm just supposed to do it.
Or what I'm even supposed to do, other than fight.
Right. They're like, you have marching orders, but like 90% of it's redacted. This is a reaction on my umpteenth reread of this book, because I'm now an adult, and I've been there.
Yeah.
And I've done some stuff, and it's just like, I understand Harry more now than I did when I might have read this the first time. Because in the first time, I might have actually been annoyed at all of this. Like, Harry, I might have been similar to what I was while reading The Order of the Phoenix. Like, Harry, you're being super emotional here or whatever. But on multiple rereads when I'm older, I'm like, I get his frustration. Mm-hmm. Like, I get how he's reacting now. I'm not just seeing him in all caps yelling for the sake of yelling. I'm like, if I'm frustrated, I've been out in the cold trying to preserve my life and fight for my life. I almost died, like, literally last night. Yeah, let me just vent. I just need a good vent session for, like, a good 20 minutes, you know? And I guess I get that more now than I might have on my earlier reads, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm vibing with you, Harry. I get it. Can we talk about Rita Skeeter, though, in all of this? Because her writing, we already talked about the dog breath, dim-witted, referring to Alpheus. She refers to babbling Bathilda in her own autobiography, where she sources Bathilda. She calls her baddie at some point in this chapter. Like, her writing is for a biography, I'm just like trying to read it from the point of view of a person in the wizarding world who's going to pick this book up at like Flourish and Blots and like read this and be like, how do you not read this and be like, her language is awfully leading. Like, it's not supposed... Like, you're supposed to be relatively objective, and if you're going to paint this picture, you can. There are ways to paint this picture in a non-leading way. Like, you just have to put it out there. I don't think you even have to do much.
Yeah, she's a tabloid writer trying to write an autobiography.
Yeah.
I also think that... Because I was thinking about this, actually, on the drive over here, was... Think about how many books have been written about Dumbledore, and she needs to do something that's different. Like, me personally, like, I read a lot of books about, like, the Disney theme parks and their creation and, like, the Imagineers and stuff like that. And since I've read a lot of books about them, like, there's been books that it's like, you know, I read 2 chapters and I'm like, you've taught me nothing new. This is written the same as every other book that I've read, and then I don't finish it. I put it back on the shelf. I don't tell anyone to read it because I'm like, this book is boring. It didn't, like, teach me anything. So Rita Skeeter writing a book that, like, what, Dumbledore probably has 100 books written about him. Everyone knows who he is. Everyone knows what he's done. Like, she needs something that she can write that then I read it and go, Dan, did you read this book? This is insane. Did you read this stuff? And then Dan goes to Flourish and Bots and he buys it. And then he goes, Molly, did you read this? Because this is insane. And because it's so intense and bold and brash and change it. Like, it gives you that little bit of doubt into Dumbledore's, like, shiny exterior that, of course, you're going to talk about it. It's going to sell more books, and it's going to put money in your pocket, but, like, now you are the famous author of a Dumbledore biography.
Yeah. With that, what do you think her intentions are with this book? Like, they're obviously, I think, they're leading statements purposefully meant to deceive the public. So is that her only goal? Is her goal strictly and purely a money grab? To a little bit of what you were saying of, like, I got to make my own book unique, so it's purely a money grab? Or do you think she might even be a believer in, going back to my tinfoil hat theory, the Grindy-Voldy side of things, and wants to maybe paint Dumbledore in a bad picture to float Grindy and Voldy?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I just want to say that she's trying to make money. Honestly.
Pure money grab?
I think she's just trying to be inflammatory and spark.
So, neutral entity doesn't really have a side in this fight, just wants to kind of spark discussion and then, like, back away from it and be like,
that's literally what she does.
Yeah.
Everything that we've seen that Rita Skeeter writes, she's just writing for notoriety. She wants someone to go, like, you know what? I read that Rita Skeeter article, and Harry Potter is a terrible person. I read that Dumbledore book that she wrote, and I never realized that he had such a dark past and that he didn't love his family. And, like, her whole career, like, clearly she's a skilled witch and could have done other things. She's an animagus. She may or may not be great at potion making, and she chooses to instead write articles, books, whatever, that make everyone talk. She wants the notoriety of it.
There might be some malice in there because, like, if you do look back to Goblet of Fire, there were times where, you know, like, Harry and Hermione, mostly Hermione, like, got some backlash in the article. So maybe there is some malice in there in terms of, like, looking back at book 4 with Dumbledore, like, banning her and all of that. I don't know.
Yeah, she's vindictive.
That. Right. So I'm sure there are some, you know, vindictive qualities in that, but at the same time, too, she's just the type to get clickbait, basically.
I would like to... I can't believe I'm saying these words out loud. I almost want to see more of Rita Skeeter's writing. I know, I can't believe I just said that myself. But I almost want to see it because I want to get a greater... Because, like what you said, Molly, we've only really gotten two really good glimpses of what her writing is like. And it's been anti-Harry Potter, and it's now been anti-Albus Dumbledore, who are two generally looked upon figures as, like, heroes. Like, these are your two golden boys, right?
But again, that's what you want to read. You want to read the takedown of the Golden Child.
Right.
She could write about the positivity of maybe, like, I shouldn't say positivity. That's a bad word to use with Voldy. But, like, the other side of Voldy. I would watch a sit-down interview with Voldy and Rita. Wouldn't that get eyeballs on a screen? I mean, I would love to see Voldy sitting down, legs crossed, just listening to Rita ask her questions, and then just peering down at the quill, just doing its own thing randomly.
Voldy with tears in his eyes. Remembering
his mother's sad story.
I kind of want that, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. Anyway, we should probably wrap it up here before we get on any other random tangents for, like, the next hour. But we hope you've enjoyed listening to this breakdown of the life and lies of Albus Dumbledore, written by one Rita Skeeter. And let us know what you think on everything we've mentioned in this episode by commenting on our socials. Like I said, we're now on Blue Sky, so join us there. Give us a follow there. You can give us a comment, like, subscribe on YouTube, which is now a relatively new thing that we've joined. And then, obviously, the old favorites like Spotify and Twitter and Instagram. Let us know what you're thinking. We like to interact with you guys, participate in those polls so we can go over those results. Other than that, thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Hogwarts a Pod.